Well, good morning, church. Such a pleasure to be here this morning. I've had a number of opportunities to speak out at your sister church at Kalula, but I think this might be the first time that I've actually spoken at this church, so I'm pretty excited this morning to meet you all and to share the work of Destiny Rescue. I have been working with Destiny Rescue now for 9 years. I came on as a team trip manager, so I had the privilege at the time of taking teams over to see the work that we're doing overseas, which was a great opportunity for me because I'm one of the only staff that have had the opportunity to see the work firsthand, and we are doing a great work overseas. If I was to share my testimony with you this morning, my testimony is basically a life of telling God what I don't want to do or places where I don't want to go. And then God has sent me to those places and got me doing those things that I didn't want to do. But I would have never changed it. I would never change a second of it. So my life has been living out of my comfort zone. But the great thing about that is that it always keeps God at front and center of everything that I do, because I know that I can't do it on my own. So this morning, I'm really excited to give you a glimpse into the work, just a small glimpse into the work that Destiny Rescue is doing in rescuing children out of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. This work that we're doing is not seen by very many, but it's real. It exists, and it's full of evil, it's full of fear, and it's full of hopelessness. But Destiny Rescue and our supporters together, we're bringing hope into this hopeless situation. And we've seen so many children find their destiny, find God, and a whole new life. So these stories are the things that keep us doing what we keep doing. So this morning I just want to share a little bit on what does human trafficking look like, God's heart in it, what Destiny Rescue is doing to try and end this evil, and later on I'll share on how you can get involved and be a part of the solution with us. My first story I want to share with you is from a girl named Sally. She came from a very poor village. She had many siblings. Her parents were unable to care for them as they should have. So Sally took it upon herself to go and look for work to help make ends meet for her family. Now you've got to understand Sally's situation. She's from a very poor village. She's never travelled anywhere. The only people she knows is the people that she's grown up with and just her village. So this one particular morning, she packed her little backpack with what she owned, and she was able to get a ride into the city on the back of a truck.
I met a lot of girls, different stories, different tragedy. I realized it's real, and I feel like a home. It's like a.
Here Sally climbed down off the truck, and she stood on the sidewalk or the pavement and watched the truck disappear into the distance. Standing there very alone, very afraid, and quite hungry, she saw a noodle bar off to the side, so she decided to go in and get some noodles for lunch. And inside this noodle bar was a lady who'd been watching what was going on. And when Sally entered the noodle bar, the lady said to her, "Oh, what are you doing here in town? Are you on your own? Are you looking for work? Are you needing a place to stay?" And Sally said to her that a friend of hers from her village had left the village a year before and was able to get work and a place to stay. And she thought if she could just find her friend, she might be able to set her up with work and accommodation. Well, the lady in the noodle bar picked up her phone and pretended to make some phone calls. And then after a little while, she put the phone down and she said to Sally, "I think I found your friend. Come and follow me." So Sally followed her out of the shop and down the street and across the road and into another building. And when they got into the building, Sally looked around and she couldn't see her friend anywhere there. And then next thing, she was taken up a flight of stairs and down a hallway, and shown a room. Now, inside this room was just a rickety old bed, and Sally was then handed some clothes, which consisted of a short skirt and a top, and she was told to rest for tonight. She will start work. Now, as you can imagine, at this point, Sally was very confused because she thought she was just here to meet her friend. But her confusion only increased when later that night, men started visiting her room. Many people today are under the belief that slavery was abolished, that it doesn't exist anymore, but this is so not true. There are more slaves today than ever before in history. It just comes under a new name called human trafficking. Last year in October, I had the privilege of going over to Thailand to work with our rescue agents on the streets at night. But during the day, we went and visited one of our partner safe homes. And while we were there, we met this young guy who told us his story. His name was Knight, and he was 14 years at the time, but he had just had his 15th birthday when we met him. Now, he was your ordinary Thai kid. He was able to go to school. He had a good upbringing. His mother had died when he was young, and he was being raised by his grandmother and his father. And then this one particular afternoon, he decided, which he's done many times before, to go down to the local arcade and play some video games. And when he was playing video games, he was approached by a man. And the man said to him, "I own a video arcade down the road. If you would like to come, I'll let you play our games for free." So what 14-year-old boy wouldn't take up that opportunity? So he followed the man down the street. And then he was taken into this building, and behind him the door was locked. And for nearly 4 months, Knight had to serve men night after night after night. Fortunately, his father never gave up looking for him in those whole 4 months. And finally, his father came across one of our rescue agents and told him the story. So one of our rescue agents went out undercover, posing as a client, looking for a good time out, found this establishment, went in and identified Knight. And fortunately for Knight, he was rescued along with 3 other boys who had been trapped in the same situation. And when Knight was talking to us, he'd gone through our program and he was waiting to be able to go back to school this year, which he started back in January. And his dream was to become a mechanic. That's all he wants to do, is become a mechanic. And he will get there too, because he was a bright young lad with a good future ahead of him. Another story is a boy named Dee, and I met him on a Zoom call back at the beginning of the year. And he was another Thai boy, 16 years old at the time, and he was looking through Facebook and saw that there was a job advertised to go to Cambodia and work on websites. There was a lot of perks offered, and he thought, what a great opportunity, I have to take this up. So he gets himself over to Cambodia. Again, he finds himself in a building that had been locked behind him. And what he had discovered is that the job wasn't, well, it was working on websites, but it was totally different to what he was expected. He had to take on a fake ID, so his ID was of a woman, and his job was to scam people all over the world through the website, through phone calls and things like that. And what he didn't know at the beginning is there's thousands of Asians being trapped and coerced by human traffickers into working in this online web scams. Fortunately, because he was working with mobile phones, he was able at one point to send a location alert to his mum, who then contacted one of our agents, and working with police were able to get him out. But there's an estimated 3,000 Thai victims caught up in these labour scams at any one time. 15% of our rescues last year were basically children who have been trapped into these child labour scenarios. Human trafficking is the second largest illegal trade in the world, but it's the fastest growing. The fastest is drugs, and even drug traders today are exchanging their cargo for humans because of the less risk and the higher profits. You can sell a human over and over and over again, but you can only sell a drug at one time. It's a $99 billion industry. Now, to give you an idea of what that looks like, Nike, Disney, and Coca-Cola have a combined revenue of $91 billion a year, and trafficking is a $99 billion industry. So it's huge and it's full of corruption. The average age that we rescue is 16, but it's not uncommon for us to rescue children a lot younger. The youngest that we've rescued to date was only 17 months old. And she's doing well. I checked in with her a couple of years ago, and she was adopted out to a Christian family, and her development is that of a normal child. So we're so thankful for her. As you know, trafficking is a huge problem, and it is largely brought on by two things: poverty and lack of education. And it's these two things that parents are sending their kids out into the streets to look for work. And then they, because of their lack of education, they don't have any skills. The only thing that they can do is work in bars and brothels, and this is where the abuse and the exploitation starts to happen. I've travelled to Cambodia many times now, and you don't have to travel very far before you start seeing these establishments called karaoke television bars, or KTVs for short. They've become a very big part of the culture and part of the landscape now there in Cambodia. And they're the place that you can go to have a good time and to pick up women. And our agents went in there one night in a large town that they were working in, and they went into one of the large KTVs there. And they were going up to the third floor, and the lift stopped at all the different levels along the way. And when they looked out, that they could see that about on every floor there was about 100 women working in these establishments. So when they got to the top, they thought, well, there's about 300 women working here. And what they noticed is about a third of them were under the age of 18. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it's such a sad fact that there's such a demand for sex in the world today that an establishment like this exists, much less the other 800 establishments just like this one just in Cambodia alone. And this brings out the second issue of trafficking. It's the Western men, it's men who are going over on sex tourism trips and engaging in this. And unfortunately, Australians have been identified as being the largest group of sex tourists prosecuted in Thailand. That's something to be proud of, isn't it, as being an Aussie? We're the ones feeding this industry. But there is hope. And as Shelley read out early, that verse from Luke 4, and I'm often reminded too of in Exodus when God is talking to Moses at the burning bush, and he says, he's addressing the slavery in Egypt, and he says that he's come to rescue these slaves. He's heard the cries of his people. And when I read that, I'm reminded, that's modern day slavery now. Like, God has heard the cries of these children, and he's sending organizations like Destiny Rescue, people like myself and you, out to rescue these children, to bring freedom to these children. And the situation where in Luke 4, we see Jesus had just spent 40 days in the desert being tempted by the devil. He'd come out from that and gone to the town of Galilee, and he started his teaching ministry, and his name started to spread out through the land. And he decided to go back to Nazareth, to his hometown, and on the Sabbath, as normal, he went into the temple, and he stood up and he read that verse basically from the scroll, which comes from Isaiah 61. And at that moment, he was basically making one statement. He was making a statement saying what his mission on earth was all about. And that mission was to rescue. See, Jesus wasn't coming just to preach good news about the kingdom of God, but he came to fulfill his Father's will by bringing freedom and deliverance to his people. When you look at the ministry of Jesus on earth, it was centered around those who were vulnerable, those who were spiritually, socially, and economically poor. Vulnerability often leads to exploitation, it leads to oppression, and it leads to injustice. And Jesus is calling each of us to address this injustice in the world today. One of the great examples in the Bible that I really like is the woman at the well. Now, this woman was from Samaria, which was a town that was rejected by the Jews. The Jews would travel many distances to avoid going to this town. And here Jesus was entering this town. And the other thing that wasn't the cultural norm is that he sat and he talked to this woman, a Samaritan woman, at the well. But the thing about this is Jesus knew all about this woman. He knew her past. He knew that she had been married 5 times before, and the woman that she was with now wasn't her husband. But that didn't matter to Jesus. He didn't judge her. He cared for her. He spent more time with this woman in the book of Luke than any other person in the whole book. He even revealed to her that he was the coming Messiah. And the great thing I love about this story too is he commissioned her to be his minister to the people in Samaria. She brought many people to Jesus in a town that she was being rejected by. And there's so many stories in the New Testament or throughout the Bible where Jesus takes those who are vulnerable and turns it around and makes them into something, gives them a great destiny. Jesus went to great lengths to rescue the one. Now, I can't think of a better example in the Gospels being shown out than what Destiny Rescue is doing and rescuing these children out of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. We have agents in 12 countries now around the world who are out there night after night after night looking for children that have been trafficked and identifying them and bringing them out to freedom. We have 5 main ways that we do our rescues. The first one is covert, which is basically the stories that I shared earlier, where our agents are going posing as customers into establishments, pretending to look for a good time, but what they're actually doing is looking for underage girls. And then once they have identified and built the trust with these girls, which can take some time because these girls aren't used to the good guys coming into places like this, so it can take a while, but after they've got the trust, they will take the girl to a safe place like a McDonald's or a Markets or somewhere like that, and then they will offer her a way out. Sometimes they go straight away, sometimes it takes time because of the trust factor and the stories that they hear have been offered better lives, and then they find out that they end up in worse situations. The other area of rescue is that we do raids. We work with local law enforcement officers in our countries, more the higher end, the anti-trafficking end, equivalent to our FBI here in Australia. This has happened over recent years because in the beginning we were working just with the police on the streets and we found that there was a lot of corruption there. So a lot of the times we would go and do raids, there was tip-offs, and when they got there, the kids were actually taken away from that place, so there was none there to rescue. But now, most of our raids are 100% successful because of the trust now that we have with the higher end police and working with them. We gather the intel for them, video footage that an establishment or an individual is selling children, and then we'll take that to the police and then a raid will be organised. And the great thing about a raid is that multiple children are rescued, and more importantly, the perpetrator is caught and put behind bars. Our third rescue is one of my favourites because it's more prevention, is our border crossings. So we have 24 border stations in Nepal, and they're operated by women rescue agents, and a lot of these women that are working for us were actually caught up in this whole scenario themselves and were rescued from that situation, so now they're helping us and giving back. And their job is to identify girls who have been tricked into thinking they met the love of their life on an online dating site, or it may be a guy that they've met out in the street or on Facebook or something like that. And then for a while he's established this relationship with them to the fact that the girl thinks they've met the one. And what the girl then gets told is that if she can get across to the border, she could be offered marriage and a good job and a good lifestyle. And because these girls are all vulnerable, they're all living in poverty, they think, what a great opportunity. So they sneak out of home, don't tell their parents, and they think, well, their parents will forgive them when they find out that they're actually making a lot of money and they're happily married and can support the family. But what happens is once they get across the border, they find out that they've been tricked and end up in the hands of a pimp. And the problem here is they can be trafficked anywhere over the world at this point, which makes it very hard to rescue them, to locate them. So our agents are there on these 24 stations across the border. And the border's like 100 kilometres long or something, so 24 is just minute in comparison where we want to get to in setting up these stations. But they have the permission from the government to stop any vehicle, any individual going across the border and ask them questions. So buses come through. You can understand that this border is not like a country border that we expect. This border is basically like Coolangatta and Tweed Heads. Anyone can walk across. There's no setups, there's no visa checks, nothing. They just walk across like we do in Coolangatta and Tweed Heads. So our girls there hop on the buses or individuals, and if there's someone suspicious, if they're sitting with a young girl sitting with a young guy, they will start asking questions. And it's not long before they identify that this girl has been tricked into this particular scenario. So they'll take the girl. If she's with the guy then, the guy will be separated. We'll take the girl separately. And then she will be placed in one of our safe homes that we have on the border there. And we will contact her parents and pay for her parents to come down to the border to meet her. And then while they're with us at the border, we will educate them on the dangers of this type of trafficking, so that they can go back to their village and their community and share the same things, so that we can stop that happening in the communities and the villages. So that's our border stations. The next one I'm going to talk about is the online sexual exploitation of children, or OSEC. This is very new to us. It came about through COVID when everybody kind of locked down and these establishments were all closed down, and a lot of these perpetrators and pimps went to the online site. So it's a growing industry, and human traffickers and child abusers are using the web to exploit children to a broader audience. There are over a million child predators online at any time. So the danger to children has never been greater than what it is now. So we were fortunate enough to be able to hire a staff member who was an ex-investigator in Auckland, New Zealand, working in this whole anti-trafficking space. And he's come alongside and he's training our agents into how to work online. But the other great thing that's just happened recently this year is that we've been given access to this technology that the police used to track down the terrorists involved in the Bali bombings. And we now have access to this technology where we can identify perpetrators who are online at any given moment, who are swapping videos and photos and doing online acts and things like that. So it's not as simple as that. There's a lot of photos and images and videos to sift through before they can actually pinpoint who the perpetrator is. But we are now forefront in this, and we're actually at the moment training the police in Thailand on how to use this technology, and we're also training other NGOs who are doing similar work to us into this technology as well. So we're excited that we can lead out and try and stop this online before it starts taking on too much. Our final rescue is our survival rescue, and basically that is in Africa. We're in 3 countries now in Africa, Uganda, Zimbabwe and Kenya. And what our agents discovered here was during COVID, our agents had permission by the government to go into the villages and take food parcels in. And when they went into these villages, they discovered that there was a huge percentage of homes that were being led by children. Because in Africa, you're probably aware, there's a big issue of HIV and AIDS and malnutrition and all sorts of diseases. So the average age of a person living in these countries is only 19 years old. So there's a lot of households where children are feeding and looking after their own siblings. And the only way, because of the poverty, because of the lack of education and lack of skills, the only way that they could feed the siblings and themselves was to sell their own bodies on the streets to put food on the table. So our agents are now going into these villages and taking these food packages, which then takes the pressure off the child of having to provide the food for the family, and then we can work with the child, we can work with the family. And if the child's too young, then we will look for a close relative or a close friend of the child, and we'll work with them. So we've now started up these small business enterprises where these girls might take something small and then we fund it and train them, and they can grow it into a pretty prosperous business. Some examples are one girl bought a big bag of laundry powder and she divides it up into little bags and is able to sell those bags to people in the village. There's another guy who had a phone, he was selling SIM cards for their mobile phones, and we came along and said, why don't we move you to a busier place and bring in phone accessories, phone cases and chargers and things like that, and you can sell those. And so now he has a really good business in the phone industry. So there's so many of these little industry shops and that are popping up in the villages that is funded by and trained by Destiny Rescue. So that's how we do our rescues. To give you an idea of what we've accomplished so far, to date we started in 2001, but we started counting our rescues in 2011. And today we have conducted 547 raids working with law enforcement, 696 arrests, and 28 establishments have been closed down. And to date we've rescued 12,800 victims from human trafficking. So that's a lot of victims that now have their freedom. But if we stopped at rescue, then there's a good chance that these kids are going to end up back in these bars and these establishments. So we had to come up with a good plan that would keep these kids safe. And so what happens when a child is rescued, one of two things will happen. If it's safe to do so, we'll return them back to their families. Only if it's safe to do so and that they have parents to return to. But if it's not safe, they'll be taken to one of our partner organisations that we're working with in each country, and they will get accommodation and food and looked after well there. And we have what we call a Pathway to Freedoms course, which is a 6 to 12 month course, and every child rescued has the opportunity to participate in this course. And in that, they get medical checkups, they get financial support, they learn life skills, if they're young, they have the opportunity to go into school and get in an education. They'll learn a trade or a vocation, whatever. They have the opportunity to dream again. It's like, what would you like to be now? And some of them, they love hairdressing and beauty and nursing and sewing and things like that. So we make sure that they have what they need so that they can survive and support their families on that. And then for a 2-year period, we keep an eye on them to make sure that they are doing okay. And at any point, a child has our phone numbers and they can ring if they're in any sort of trouble again. You're probably wondering what happened to Sally. It's a story that I started at the beginning. One night our agents came into her establishment and they noticed her there. She was with a customer at the time, but they waited for her to finish and then they called her over. And for a period of time, they spent building trust with her because for a long time, she did not trust our agents. And one day she decided to go to one of our homes to check out what our homes were all about and to meet other girls that were in the same situation. And just have a video now where you can hear the rest of her story from her herself.
I met a lot of girls, different stories, different tragedy. I realized I feel like a home. It's like a home, and And I said yes, I would love to join the VR. It was the biggest decision I did, and it was the right decision I ever did in my life. I was there 1 year to provide my study. My life changed.
Hey, mister. How are you? Seeing her for the first time in a little while, and I was excited to see her. I was excited to find out what was new in her world. The change is black and white.
I save a lot of money. Even I'm at school, I'm selling clothes. I had a store, and I have piggery now in the province.
She's now working a full-time job for an advertising firm. She looks a lot healthier. She's still got that same spirit. She's still got the same quirks, but a lot has changed. She's done a lot of growing up since leaving Destiny Rescue's home. Once a month, she saves up enough money to go and buy food and clothes, and she cooks and prepares these things, and she goes out to feed the homeless and clothe them, donate her time and spend time with them.
And by doing that, there's a guy approached me like, wow, I'm amazed. We would love to help kids there. Yeah, and then they asked me if I can join their group, which is just like you.
She carries herself with a lot of pride and confidence, unlike when I first met her.
And I started a new life. And I promised to myself that after that I won't ever come back there, and I will be successful one day, which is I did now, which I am now, which I'm so proud of myself.
I just want to say I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. Gusto ako hindi mag-water ko.
Thousands of similar stories, just like Sally's. Sometimes the whole issue of human trafficking can get very overwhelming for us. Like statistics say that there's 1.2 million children trafficked every year, and that's a huge figure. And we could very easily say, it's too hard, there's too many, we can never make a difference. And when this happens, I often think about the story of the boy. He was standing on the beach after a storm had come through his community, and it had washed up thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish. And he was down on the water edge picking these starfish up and throwing them back into the water. And then along came an elderly gentleman on his routine walk, and he saw the boy and he said to the boy, "What are you doing?" And the boy said, if I don't get these starfish back into the water, they're going to die because the sun's about to come up and the tide's going out. And the man looked up the beach and he saw the thousands and thousands of starfish there and said, "There's no way that you can make a difference." And then the boy bent down, picked up a starfish, put it in the water and said, "For that one, I did." And that's exactly where we keep our focus. It's the one, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And now we're at 12,800 next ones. And that's a lot of ones. That's a lot of children who have been taken out of a hopeless situation and given a new life, a new destiny, and most importantly, they've met Jesus as their Lord and Saviour. So I just want to come to the end now, and I've shared a lot of information with you this morning. The numbers, statistics, stories are pretty shocking and can be overwhelming. Trafficking of children is a huge issue, but you can become a part of the solution. Every child has a name. She has a beautiful personality, she has a bright smile, and she has a future. You just saw that in Sally's testimony. They like what your own children like. They want what your own children want. And supporting the work of Destiny Rescue, you can help a child experience the life that you would want every child to experience. You contribute to the rescue of a child. You help her to be rescued out of a hellish nightmare and into her destiny. These kids need you. They need you to say it's not okay to sell kids for profit. This needs to be abolished, and they need you and I to be their voice. They deserve what Jesus died to give them. In Psalm 82:4 it says, "Rescue the weak and needy, deliver them from the grasp of evil people." As a supporter, you'll not only help rescue her out of the hands of evil people, but you will empower her to stay free. She won't have to go to bed at night to work. She can go to bed tonight to sleep. You empower her to feel secure and have a safe place to live. You help her meet her immediate needs so the weight and the pressure falls off her in providing for her younger siblings, in some cases a parent or grandparent. You'll help her with the trauma counselling, her education, her vocational training and safe job placement. And most important, you help her with the spiritual care so that she can understand where her real rescue comes from. As a rescue partner, you get to decide how much God has blessed you so that you can be a blessing to others. You can choose any amount that suits your budget. Every one of you can go on a mission today to rescue children. You may not be able to go overseas to rescue them themselves, and you don't need to, but you can be a big part of it. You can rescue by providing financial resources that God has gifted you with. It only takes a minute. I have forms out there on the table. It only takes a minute to fill out this form and hand it in. And if you're anything like me, a lot of the times I pick these forms up and take them home with all the intentions of filling them out, but they end up in a whole pile of good intentions that never come to fruition. So if God is speaking to you this morning and you have a heart to want to partner with us and help us rescue more children out of exploitation, please fill out one of these forms, or I'll be standing at the back after the service. Come and ask me any questions you like. I can chat about this issue all day long. So thank you for the privilege of having this opportunity to share with you this morning, and I'll hand it back to Shelley. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nerilee. It is a confronting and shocking story to hear about some of these, isn't it? But as Nerilee explained, there's a way that we can be like that person who throws the starfish in. It doesn't mean we have to go, but there is a way. And it just makes me all the more appreciative of we have a God whose heart is for rescue. You know, it started with me, and we see it in the work of Destiny Rescue. So let me encourage you, especially if God's put that on your heart about what could you be doing, then please stop and speak with Nerilee at the back. And remember, there's a basket there if you want to leave a donation, or there's other ways you can do that. So thank you, Nerilee.